Welcome back to another episode of the Water Matters podcast. Today I'm pleased to be joined by Tim Smedley, and we are going to cover quite a different topic for our listeners today. There is still, of course, a water theme. We will be talking about water throughout the conversation, otherwise it wouldn't be appropriate for the Water Matters podcast. But it is going to look at things from a slightly different angle. Bit of a different topic, very relevant to the time of year that this episode is being recorded and being shared with you all. So, first of all, Tim, how are you? It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, Matt. I'm well. I'm good. I'm tanned, which is relevant to the conversation.
Exactly.
It's been sunny for like the last 2 months.
Hasn't it just?
It's early May.
It's unheard of, or certainly unexpected, I think.
And it's been kind of nice. I'm not gonna moan about it, but there also has been some worrying aspects to that. But in terms of living a nice kind of early to mid spring, it's been quite a nice few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think very relevant that we start off with the fact that April showers were kind of non-existent, weren't they?
Yeah, they didn't happen at all. I mean, I was just saying I keep a back garden rain gauge. I don't check it as much as I used to when I was writing the book, but I still check it every now and then. And there's basically only been one rainfall event in about the past 6 weeks in my back garden in Banbury. So yeah, April showers did not happen, did not materialise.
No, and so for anyone that's listening for the first time, or if this is one of your first experiences of the Water Masters podcast, Tim is the author of the book called The Last Drop, solving the world's water crisis. So, of course, in the few years that that Tim was researching and then writing that book, he spent a lot of time, I imagine, monitoring and sort of rainfall events, whether they were frequent or not, were probably more significant to you back then, as it all sort of provided you with content and reference points for the many topics and different sort of chapters in the book. But yeah, I think if you were writing that now, it would be influencing your writing a fair bit, because especially when you compare it to last year, the same sort of period last year, and I remember it mostly just because in our business we had a period of sort of February, March, April where people didn't want to install underground water tanks because it was so wet, and it just, a typical installation of a sewage treatment plant that might take 1 or 2 days was taking 1 or 2 weeks, just because they'd have to deal with the removal of water and then have pumps pumping out the water and all this sort of stuff because it rained such a lot. And this year has been the exact opposite, really, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. And again, with climate change, I've said it a few times on the pod, but we're seeing longer dry periods followed by longer wet periods. So we're yo-yoing between flood and drought, and that's exactly what's happening at the moment. And we had a really wet winter. So it's not as if over the year we're not getting enough water. We kind of are, but the way that water is coming to us, essentially, the way those rainfall patterns are happening is changing. So longer wet periods followed by longer dry periods. And yeah, we're talking about very little rainfall in April. There's very little in March.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
It's been a long dry period. I mean, I was looking at the stats just before coming out, and April was the sunniest since records began, with a mean temperature of 1.7 degrees Celsius above average. That's quite a significant amount above average for this time of year. And the UK received just over 56% of the rainfall it would usually expect in April. And the Thames area, which is where we are, was particularly dry, getting just 13% of its average rainfall for April. So it has been significantly dry, and there's already drought warnings kind of being rumoured. So it's quite significant today, in fact. The government are convening the Drought Task Force, which doesn't come together very often, to discuss what's happening, because reservoir levels are already low in some parts of the country. I think I saw that United Utilities were down. I can't quite find the stat now, but United Utilities reservoirs are down to about 70%, and they're typically over 90% at this time of year. So, yeah, it will have an impact unless we have a really wet mid-summer, which could happen.
Yes,
this,
true.
this is England.
Yes,
So,
yes.
again, long dry periods followed by long wet periods. It could happen. It's just statistically less likely to happen in midsummer. So could be a dry year that we're in for.
Yeah, and hopefully, therefore, people are, a bit like you said a moment ago, making the most of what has been a fantastic
But that's the flip side of it, right? You kind of do have to make the most of it, especially early in the year. So we're not quite at the time of year when we're talking about heat being dangerous. That happens in more midsummer.
Yeah.
And if you got a warm April, you do have to make the most of it. Don't you?
Of course you do. Of course you do.
Because we've all experienced really wet April.
Exactly. And I think that it certainly encourages people out into their gardens. All of a sudden, you start to appreciate the garden more and start doing some work in it. And I think that people then do, I think, become more aware of, how often it does or doesn't rain. And I think that the majority of people who do enjoy the sunnier days and the warmer weather would probably perhaps not have noticed or realised quite how long it's been since a decent sort of rainfall or prolonged rain over a few days, and therefore as soon as it does come, I think they probably just immediately moan about it and just sort of that's the way it goes, isn't it? But,
definitely. I mean, one thing that this April has reminded me of is the April of COVID, the lockdown April 2020.
Yeah.
And we had a similar April then. It was really sunny, really dry, but that was kind of a positive thing then because we were all stuck at home.
Indeed.
People that did have gardens could go out in them. And it was one of the few things we could do, and that was actually a bit of a blessing at that time.
It was.
But I do also remember, so that's around the time that I'm starting to research the book. I got the book deal in, I think it was March 2020.
Okay.
Just weeks before the world lockdown.
Yeah.
I thought, oh no, what am I going to do research-wise?
Yes.
But yeah, we did have this time out in the garden with my daughters who was suddenly off school, off nursery.
Yeah.
And I do remember one of my early interviews was with someone from Thames Water, and they told me that April, and that was, just weeks before in the context of that interview, was the highest water demand ever for Thames Water, because everyone was stuck at home and everyone was in their garden.
Yes.
And gardening and things like even paddling pools, I think it was warm enough for paddling pools that April.
Yeah.
Were suddenly something that people could do.
Yes.
And it was an interesting thing because it was an experiment you wouldn't be able to run to say, right, how much benefit would there be from the businesses and industry and so on not running and not having their water demand, and only having it in households. We kind of got the answer.
Yes.
It's higher overall if it's only household use and garden use specifically.
Yes.
And that will get us onto today's topic, because the use of water in our own gardens is actually hugely significant to overall national water use.
Yes.
And I'll stop there.
Yes, no, absolutely. And as you say, perfect segue into the topic of today's episode, which is Tim has very kindly written a brilliant piece which will be shared by the time this episode is released on all the podcast channels and our YouTube channel. Tim's article on No Mow May will be already on the watermatters.life website. And so that's the subject for today. We're in May. This episode is going out, I think, on Friday, the 16th of May. And so in the middle of the month, hopefully, you're not listening to this and then immediately regretting having mowed your lawn over the past 2 weeks. But Tim is going to, or we're going to go into details about sort of why No Mow May exists. I mean, it's not easy to say for starters. But and also the surprising connection between longer grass and smarter water use and deeper roots and all sorts of things that was certainly news to me when I read the article. And of course, bringing it back to I'm sure the primary reason for No Mow May coming into existence was not to save water, but actually there are multiple benefits from a water perspective because of it. And so, yes, if you haven't seen it already, first thing I would like to say is do go to watermatters.life. You'll find the this most recent article in the featured articles section on the website, and so you read that at your leisure and find out more specifics about it. But let's have a chat about it. Let's first of all, for anyone that's never heard of it, because I'm sure there'll be some people that are not aware, that people are encouraged not to mow their grass in May.
Yeah, exactly. That it's as simple as that. No Mow May.
Yeah.
It's asking people not to mow their lawns in May, but also councils don't mow your verges and don't mow the roundabouts. And so it's beyond just people's lawns. When I say just, so it was started by a wildlife and plant charity called Plant Life, and they only started it in 2018. So it's still relatively recent. It's been becoming a bigger thing year on year. And yeah, the ask is don't mow your lawn in May, and you can go onto the website. I think it's plantlife.org. Google Plant Life, you'll find it.
Yeah.
Google No Mow May, and you can sign up. Also, slight kind of, not even a spoiler, but it's not all about May. So if you're listening to this, you picked this podcast up in November or whatever, there's relevance throughout the year, and we'll get onto that in a bit. But the idea is things are just starting to grow much more and more rapidly in May. But a lot of plant life, especially wildflowers and especially native grasses, benefit from not being mown. And in turn, the pollinators, insects, the wider food web benefits from that too. And in terms of the reach of gardens, so this was from Plant Life stats. They say that there's around 23 million gardens in the UK. Which together totals around 500,000 hectares, which is about the size of Norfolk, one of our largest counties.
Right.
So it's a significant amount of land mass in the UK. So how we treat our gardens, it has a significant impact on wildlife, on pollinators, on insects, and specifically on wildflowers and grasses.
Yeah, that reminds me of, just to interject a little bit, just quickly, it reminds me of, we've talked about several things on previous episodes about sort of encouraging people that to do their bit, because it's the collective impact of everyone doing their part or playing their part within their property or their life, that actually it may feel like a small, almost insignificant thing if you don't play your bit, or but actually it's the combined collective effort of everyone doing it that then has that amount of impact, because as I say, that's enormous, really. And it's easy to forget that, or easy just not to sort of realize that we are playing a small piece of a big sort of effort or big puzzle, that if you do get involved, then the overall result is greater and is worth it.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And also, we spend a lot of time talking about quite macro issues. The last time I was in, we were talking about water bills and water companies and how, the infrastructure challenges and so on. But gardens or how we treat the wildlife around us. So not everyone has a garden, but you can also have, windowsill pot plants.
Yep.
You will be part of a local authority council around you that you can have influence on in terms of whether they take part in No Mow May or how they generally look after their grass verges and so on.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're completely right. Going back to gardens, if you picture your one garden as more of a wildlife habitat, that's instantly having an impact. But then if you picture it, there's 2 or 3 people in your neighborhood that are also doing it, that becomes something of a wildlife corridor for pollinators and birds. And then if everyone does it, it's great. But it does show, even if it's just you are having an impact.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's. I mean, I'm sure this was why they also started it in May, not just to make it difficult for me to say No Mow May a number of times on this podcast, but I'm sure there will be some people listening that, unlike you, because you in the article refer to the fact that you actually quite enjoy mowing your lawn. I'm sure there are an equal number of people a bit more like me who don't, and so they probably already have, because we've had to, because again, with the nicer weather, we've got out in the garden already. So maybe partway through March or certainly early April, people were thinking, okay, we want to go and make some use of this outdoor space, but one of the first things you always have to do is mow the lawn. And so yeah, if that is not a joy to you, then you might be sort of thinking, this is brilliant. I've just been given permission to not mow my lawn for the next sort of couple of weeks.
Yeah, true.
And perhaps longer. We go on to that. Which, as long as you sort of are fine with what that means in terms of what it looks like, what you can use it for, that could also be quite good news for people. Do you know? Well, I mean, you like mowing your lawn, so you're not going to agree, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do know what I mean. It gives us all an excuse to be lazy.
Exactly.
And also a bit of an excuse for if the neighbours say, oh, you've left your front lawn unkempt. You say, well, I'm taking part in No Mow May.
Exactly.
I'm looking after the wildlife.
Permission.
And the insects. The thing about me enjoying mowing a lawn, I did used to. But so I've done No Mow May for about the last 3 years, I guess.
Yeah.
And I've gotten really into the wildflower kind of patches and the longer grass patches. Yeah. What I do, and actually what Plant Life recommend, is to keep a mown strip. So I've got 2 young children. Okay. I had in the past just not mown, but then they haven't really got any lawn space to play on, and they weren't really going outside. So since then, I've started to kind of mow. I think they call them recreation strips, kind of going through it. So you've got some wild, unmown sections, and the unmown I don't mow at all, other than towards the end of the year. Okay. And then there's kind of some mown strips. But in May specifically, I won't even mow the mown strips. No, I'll leave it all untouched. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And you'll, even though you do, it sort of, or it's not your least favourite thing to do, there is something satisfying about not having to do it at all, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. And especially if you see the benefits of it. So you start to see some wildflowers pop up. And Plant Life, they encourage people to send photos of their No Mow May lawns, or record. I think you can go into more detail and be part of their survey and record which plants come up. And they've got hundreds of new people reporting new flowers in their lawn that they hadn't seen before. New plants they haven't seen before.
Indeed, because some people, if you've just never let it grow and kind of just left it alone, some people wouldn't even be aware of what will just pop up unexpectedly, right? And so some of them have been very nice wildflowers and that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. But then the other benefit for the lazy gardener, you don't also have to water non-mown lawns. Now, arguably, you don't have to water mown lawns either. We can get onto that. Yeah. But the benefit of letting nature take over your lawn to an extent is that they put down deeper roots, and they don't need watering all the time with sprinklers and hoses. And that is where we get this huge water impact. Now, you're right, this wasn't why Plant Life started it in the first place. They're more about the wildflowers and the wild meadow plants and so on. But they have also done research on the water savings. Now, the amount of water used in gardens is staggering. So a hose pipe or sprinkler, if you've got it on for an hour, you'll use around 1,000 litres of water. Now, we've talked before about average water use. If you leave a tap running on full, if you've got decent water pressure, that's about 16 litres per minute of water. So if you've got that running through a hose or a sprinkler, 16 litres a minute. You can easily leave a sprinkler on for an hour. 1,000 litres of water is about a family of 4's water supply for 2 days on average.
Absolutely.
And again, that's the kind of we have quite a high average in the UK. So water use is particularly high, and at times of peak demand. So thinking about that lockdown April, or possibly even this April just gone, we haven't yet got the figures on it, but up to 70% of water supply in the daytime can be going to gardens, to gardening. So how and why we use water in our gardens is really significant to our overall water use and our overall water problems. So if we're saying that actually you don't need to do that, firstly, this kind of concept that a lawn has to look a certain way is a cultural concept.
Yes.
It goes back to kind of Regency era lawns and Capability Brown and so on. We've kind of got that stuck in our head in terms of what a lawn should look like. So that's one thing. It's kind of questionable. Why do we need that in the first place? Not everyone plays croquet anymore.
Yeah, no.
Certainly not to the levels that maybe used to happen. But also, just this, the idea that it needs watering is partly self-reinforcing, in that if you've got a really close cut lawn, so you're mowing it all the time and you're watering it all the time, it will have really shallow roots. So it will need watering because you've maintained it in a way that it's kept shallow roots. It needs watering. If you let it grow a bit longer, those roots get a bit longer. It needs watering a little less, and so on. So if you actually have sections of your lawn that are just fully wild, fully meadow, which I have some parts of my lawn. I don't have a big lawn, by the way. I've just got a small terraced house, but I've got, some lawn. The long grass segments have not been watered for, I don't know, however long I've been doing this, 3 years. They've never died out. They've never fully gone brown or fully dried.
No.
The brown bits are the mowing bits, the recreation parts that I do keep mowing.
Yeah.
But even then, they will grow back. So grass is really resilient. That's why we like it so much. That's why we have lawns of grass, because grass is really resilient. So it can go dry, it can go brown, but come autumn, when the rainfall starts getting heavy again, it'll bounce back.
Yeah.
And that is what I've seen happen. So I used to think that I had to mow, every weekend, that I had to water the lawn to keep it green.
Yes.
And when you stop doing both of those things, it's fine. And actually kind of better.
Yes.
Not just kind of in terms of water efficiency, although since writing this book and, being a regular guest on the pod, that's my main focus.
It's really,
But it's also kind of easier. And you see insects and you see wildflowers pop up and you see more butterflies than you used to. And so it's just a real benefit.
Yeah, and I was thinking, as you said, about sort of this, almost this conditioning that I think a lot of people probably have had some influence from, in terms of a lawn should be well kept. It should be, neatly cut grass. And if you think about the majority of picturesque places that people go to, National Trust properties or nice hotels or whatever, some of them are big enough to have wild grass sections, of course, but the majority of their lawns, as you drive up and you see the the big property or the house or whatever, they're very well kept. They are, like you said, they're sort of reinforcing that idyllic sort of, the grass should always look like a perfect cricket pitch and all that sort of stuff. And I was thinking, as you were describing that, about the amount of people that I know that have put AstroTurf in. They've got rid of their lawn altogether, and they've gone like, right, I don't want the maintenance. Perhaps a little bit like me, can't be bothered to mow the lawn every few weeks or every week, because let's be honest, I think a lot of people are doing that. I think that, I don't know the numbers, but I'm sure that there are a lot of people that it's kind of their weekend, ritual almost, isn't it, to mow the lawn every weekend. And so, those, the number of people that have replaced or just ripped out their lawn and put AstroTurf down. You're permanently No Mow May or No Mow June, and the lawn is gone. But I'm reminded now, because of having read your article and even just what we've said about it already, the sort of drastic impact that has to the insects and just the wildlife and all that sort of stuff. It just, the whole thing goes away, doesn't it, when that happens? I'm not trying to pin a target on the back of people that have done that. Everyone could do whatever they want with their garden, but you know what I mean? It's quite an extreme thing. And actually, it's sort of changing the landscape. And certainly when you think about the whole collective of those 23 million gardens, if a big chunk of them just get rid of their lawn altogether and put AstroTurf down, that's not incredibly helpful from a sort of all the benefits that we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. I hadn't quite made that link before, but you're right. It comes from the same cultural wish for that perfect lawn. So how do you get a perfect lawn? Get a permanent lawn.
Yeah, exactly.
Get a permanent plastic one. Yeah, I've got friends with them too. And I can see the benefits, especially when they've got kids. But in terms of the benefits for wildlife and in the middle of a biodiversity crisis,
Yes.
it's not good. Funnily enough, though, from a purely water perspective,
Yes.
it probably is good.
Yes,
So,
I suppose they're not watering their lawn because they certainly wouldn't be doing that, would they?
that's the only benefit you can find. And in
Yeah.
fact, I went out to the American West when I was researching the book, and in Las Vegas, I think you actually get incentives from the local authority to put in an astroturf lawn,
Okay.
because it doesn't need watering.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the plastic and the fossil fuel impact and the biodiversity impact is the least of their worries in Las Vegas because it's so dry.
Yeah. Water
So
is the top topic.
weirdly, it's seen as a sustainability
Yes.
positive
Yes.
to have an astro lawn
Yeah.
in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
But we ain't in Las Vegas here. It rains plenty enough, and we do have a biodiversity and a pollinator crisis. So we do need to be helping out on that score.
Yes.
But in terms of if they're putting that astroturf down because they can't be bothered to mow, then I guess the message there is you don't need to mow.
Yes.
So
Yes, quite.
you can have that benefit. Or keep a strip like I do.
And I think that maybe that's the balance. It's like instead of the part of, like you described in your garden, the area that you do mow compared with the area that you leave to grow, you could do the same, couldn't you? With AstroTurf.
And actually, you mentioned kind of national trust properties and so on. I'm seeing more and more. I'm a lapsed member, haven't been for a little while, but last year when I kind of visited some with friends, I'm seeing more and more areas that are kept wild. They're letting meadows grow again.
Yeah.
So that, the front lawn, which would have been the croquet lawn of the grand house, is still kept perfectly mown.
Yeah.
And I think that's completely fair enough.
Yes,
Because that's part of a cultural heritage. We're all visiting as tourists, essentially, to see that. We do want to see that. But they're just outside of that. They've got full wildflower meadows.
Yeah.
In fact, I went to one last year. It's not National Trust actually, but a similar kind of grand house that you can visit called Compton Verney. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's kind of towards Stratford-on-Avon from where we are, which is Banbury.
Yeah.
And I've been going for a few years. It has an amazing art gallery. But they used to have the very kempt lawns, and they still had some of that on the outside, but around the back they'd let it grow wild into a fully wild meadow that I think they must have planted because it was so full of wildflowers. And they had various signage up about bees and pollinators, and they made it kind of into an attraction for children, and it was actually quite moving because my youngest daughter was there and she was just fascinated by it. She was walking through the wildflowers. It was a cacophony of noise of grasshoppers, which I hadn't heard since I was a kid, I think. It was quite fascinating to see what happens if you just let those meadows come back. Suddenly, all this wildlife
and encourage it a bit as well, I suppose, because that's the other extreme you can go to, I guess, is if you leave your garden for a month or a couple of months and nothing sort of exciting or unexpected pops up that's really going to brighten up your garden or whatever, you can also throw some wild seeds down.
Definitely.
You can, and which presumably wouldn't be a bad thing at all.
No, it wouldn't be. I'm not a gardening expert,
but
I have attempted similar things.
Yeah.
I have kind of scruffed up the lawn in autumn and put down wildflower seeds and so on, with very little results. I think there's better ways of doing it. Apparently now you can buy ready rolled turf of wildflowers. So you know how you buy rolled turf of normal lawn. You can buy rolled turf that's fully ready with wildflowers. So you can get really into it if you want to. So you can go from just not doing anything and see what happens to planting as many wildflowers as you can.
No, exactly. And I'm sure some people, once they do start to see the benefits, probably would be encouraged to take it that next step further and sort of make even a bigger feature of it. We talked a little bit there about the bigger impact of bigger properties and all that sort of how perhaps more can be done on a larger scale. In addition to the gardens, the verges, the roundabouts, all that sort of stuff, the council's getting involved in this as well. That's where it could have even more impact, surely, because it's on a bigger scale.
Yeah, I think so. So, councils can sign up for No Mow May, and they do. And last year they got, I think it was 56 sign up, and they're hoping for slightly more this year. And again, it's kind of like the private gardens, and they're not saying they won't mow anything, but they'll leave a certain amount of their portfolio, that's whatever the word councils would use, to be not mown. So verges, but where it's safe to. So obviously, if you think on some corners, you do need to mow them for sight lines,
visibility.
So with that in mind, it's leaving areas that could be left wild, and giving insects a chance to come in. Also, on that scale, we're talking about sit-on mowers, diesel-powered sit-on mowers. It means using them less often. So there's a saving for the council. There's also a carbon saving for burning less diesel. And added up, that becomes quite significant. So councils is an exciting area. And you will see sometimes now on roundabouts, look out for them. If you're hearing this in May, this is one of the very May-specific things, you might see on some roundabouts of verges some signs left by the council saying, we're taking part in No Mow May. And I think that's actually quite useful. Partly to explain what's happening and why, but also to say we're not just being lazy.
Exactly.
And we're not just wasting your council tax money by not doing what you might think the council's there to do.
Quite. And I'm sure my memory is terrible, but I'm sure that May last year, around our local area, did almost exactly that. Or I think we may have even, perhaps some of the neighbourhoods got involved with it, and I'm sure there were flyers through the door. Even I remember it being quite obvious what was happening.
And that's really good. I think that helps to change perceptions about what our gardens should look like, what our lawns should look like, but also what our surrounding environment should look like, what our urban environment should look like. And again, typically we've had a picture of perfectly kept verges and roundabouts, and if there are flowers, they have to be in a square border, and they're all of particular regimented kind of lines of certain colours that pop up at certain times of year. And I think moving away from that is really important, but I think we're starting to see it. So, and also in the research for this blog and this podcast, I was quite pleasantly surprised to find that a lot of the more traditional media outlets, you could say, are also now mostly on board. So I found some cool quotes. I'll read some out. So this was from Stefan Buzaki, who's a former Gardener's Question Time panellist, to the Mail, Daily Mail online, saying, never ever water your lawn. It's a complete waste of time, energy, money and everything. Then Ideal Home magazine, which I think my mum used to read, I'm not fully sure, say during a heat wave, using water irresponsibly is not only bad for the environment, but can lead to problems with your water pressure. During the dry weather in May, I think this was actually May last year, Water UK saw a huge surge in demand for water in the evenings, 40% higher than the normal for this time of year. The demand led to reductions in water pressure for some areas of the UK. Now, I think making that link between how we use water, how we use it in the garden, and actually our water supply, that's really important. I mean, that's what we know that. I think probably everyone listening to this podcast knows it. We make those kind of things apparent quite a lot. But most people, I don't think, do. And again, I don't mean to say that judgmentally. I don't think I did before researching this topic and writing this book. I did use the garden hose. I did use the lawnmower all the time. So I think we're starting to see perceptions change. And then the Royal Horticultural Society, who, by the way, as a side note, is still so old-fashioned that when I applied to do a soil test, this is for a different kind of article. They offer soil tests. You can send in a soil sample. The only way to pay for it is via cheque.
No.
So I had to find
now?
Yeah, well, it was a couple of years ago. So I don't want to say it's still now, but it wouldn't surprise me. But that's kind of how old school
I love it.
the RHS.
Have you still got a checkbook?
Well, I did.
You
But
did.
I had to find it. I had no idea where it was. I had to go through all sorts of kind of filing cabinets and things. It's incredible.
Yeah, I wouldn't. No, don't think I would be able to make that payment.
But yeah, that's how old school they are. But the official advice for them now on how and when to water your garden is, and this is on their website
Yes.
under that section. While drought can cause the top growth to turn brown and die, in a well-established lawn, the underlying roots should still be alive, ready to send up fresh leaves once rain returns. So resist the temptation to water your parched lawn. It will recover without wasting precious mains water. And then, and this was, again, no affiliation to No Mow May, it adds, mow less often and raise the cutting height and let the grass get longer, which should encourage deeper rooting. Close cutting in dry weather can weaken the grass and make it more vulnerable. So it's not kind of hugely radical, but it kind of is compared to how we all thought about lawns 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think these perceptions are shifting. And when you start to extrapolate that out to those 23 million gardens in the UK, that will hopefully have a big impact on pollinators, wildlife, but also on water use.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, I think it's helpful for people perhaps to be reminded that the hose pipe and the outside tap and hose pipe is not your only option for water use in the garden, as long as you are capturing whatever rainfall you can in perhaps more typical Marches, Aprils and Mays than we're having this year, because obviously, as we talked about at the beginning, even those people with a water butt or a rainwater harvesting tank won't have, or they're very unlikely to have captured much rainwater over the last 2 months. But it does still rain. However little it rains, it can be captured and put to good use. And so if you are going to be using any kind of water in your garden, I mean, that's the better water to use anyway, because rainwater is better for plants than mains water anyway. So hopefully, as you said a moment ago, I'm sure listeners of this podcast would already be doing it and probably already telling their friends and family to do it as well. But encouraging the use of rainwater instead of mains water would be a very, very good start to helping with this.
Yeah, completely. And I think that's the RHS advice as well now. Mm-hmm. So if you do have to water, use rainwater. It's what the plants need, is what plants drink. Mains water as well, if you live in a hard water area, it's not bad for plants, but it's not nearly as good as rainwater. It's the wrong pH. It will have too many minerals in, which can kind of over time start to clog up pores and soil and so on. In saying pores and soil, I think that already sounds wrong. But it can clog up your soil. I mean, salination of farm land through irrigation is a very known problem. Same thing, essentially, in lawns and gardening. If all you're doing is applying mains water through sprinklers and so on. Yeah. So rainwater is the right stuff for plants. Yeah. So if you need to water them, use rainwater. Probably don't even then need to water your lawn. But I mean, at the moment, I'm having to water some plants around the garden, certainly anything in pots. Yeah. And I'm using rainwater, but I'm getting close to running out. It's quite surprising for May. Yeah. So it's not as if so I've got 2 water butts, one 100 litre one and one 110 litre. That's normally fine throughout the year. That's enough for both house plants and outdoor plants, bearing in mind that I don't water as much as maybe some people traditionally would. I'm certainly not connecting any hose or sprinklers to my water butts. But normally those last throughout the year. Maybe they'll run out once in summer, but they've run out twice already this year, and we're speaking on May the 7th, so that's a first. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and certainly, just confirms that this very sort of dry period that we have had, and well, just the impact that does have. But thankfully, especially in your position, having written this book, you're not likely to be switching the water butt to the outside tap instead, and keeping your plants hydrated and all that sort of stuff with mains water. But because I think also, having spent several years focusing on this as a topic, more than most, you probably realise that it's very likely that it will rain at some point soon. Maybe not, maybe not a huge amount or whatever, but it does always come, doesn't it?
It does always come, but these moments when my water butts are getting really low, it does get nervy. Because it's only rained once in the last 6 weeks, enough to fill them back up again. And looking at the weather forecast earlier today, it doesn't look like it's going to rain, certainly not for a week.
No.
So that probably means those water butts will run out.
Yeah.
And some plants will be watered by mains water from a watering can.
Yeah.
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 And I hate it when that happens. It
Yeah.
feels like a real kind of defeat. And if I see a little bit of rain, I have been known and will run out to check that the water butts are filling up and make sure there's no debris in the way of the pipes.
Yeah.
And you can become quite obsessive about these things.
Well, you did spend many years researching the topic
Yes.
and writing about
Yeah,
it, so
true.
it does make sense. It does make sense. No, absolutely. And I think it's another thing to think about. If there's 23 million other gardens going through that exact same thing, then that's where the big impact comes.
Yeah. Yeah, and if your neighbour's got their sprinkler running 24/7, there's not much you can do about it, unless if there's a hose pipe ban, no one's allowed to do it.
Yes.
But you not doing the same is already helpful.
Yes.
In a way, if you used to have your sprinkler running all the time in dry weather, and now you don't, even if next door still is, you're halving that water use.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the two houses together. So yeah, it is one of those rare well, maybe not rare, but it is one of those sustainability messages that what you do really does matter and really does count. And also, if we're going to going back to the topic of our last blog when I came in, water bills.
Yeah.
Water bills are higher now.
Yep.
So you are also saving yourself money by using less mains water.
Yep. Absolutely. We touched on that a few times recently, and the fact that by having a water meter fitted, if you hadn't got one already, then you're sort of more in control of what you're paying for, and making sure rather that you're paying for what you're using rather than just sort of a blanket fixed amount, especially if you are a sort of higher user of water. But I think it ties into this perfectly, because just sort of being much more conscious of how much you use out in the garden, especially if you're a keen gardener and you want everything to be perfect for when people come around for those garden get-togethers and all that sort of stuff at this time of year, which then it's something to be conscious of the impact that you can have, and hopefully through collecting rainwater off whatever roof space you have is a sort of minimal starting point, just because it's very sensible.
Yeah, I think so. Sensible, easy to do, strangely satisfying. I find it to only be using water that's come off your roof, and but definitely much better for plants as well. The pH is right; it's got the right stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're really a keen gardener and want it to look its best and do as well as it can, that's what you would be choosing to use anyway.
Yeah,
for sure.
And mentioning water bills, I don't think we've talked about smart meters before for water, because they're still fairly new.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't yet seen one.
Mm-hmm.
They're more common in London.
Yeah.
So if someone in London is listening to this with on a Thames water account, they might have a smart meter. I've got a smart meter for electricity. They're much more common. And I've got the screen on the top of my microwave in my kitchen. I'm hugely aware if there's suddenly a spike. If lots of appliances are on at the same time, I know it. And I, again, have been known to go around the house trying to find what appliance is on if I don't know what's going on. But if you had that with water, wow, it would be a big change. And also, just imagine the spike if you had a garden hose or a sprinkler fully on. That would be about as high as you could possibly get. And if you were seeing that and seeing it linked to how much water that was costing per minute, even though water is relatively cheap, I think people would suddenly be aware of how big a water use that can be.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's when you do start to see a change in behaviour.
Yeah, and smart meters do exist. So I'm hoping, this has been a perennial hope, but they'll start to be rolled out and become much more common. but there is always a next 5 year thing, even though they're fitted in hundreds of thousands of homes and apartments.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just never gone beyond that. It's always kind of a successful trial,
Yes. Yeah.
But at some point, it's got to become standardized.
Surely, as things change, as we've talked about a few times, as water becomes just more, just a more important topic, as we get closer to this point of, not having as much as we need.
Yeah. I mean, and we can easily scale up the conversation to wider infrastructure in terms of, so the problem I'm having with my 2 medium-sized water butts running out, I will need to scale up to a bigger water butt.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same thing nationally.
Yes.
So
Yes.
our reservoirs
Yes.
being lower at this time of year than they normally would be, we're going to have to scale up nationally. So
Yes.
we need more water storage to keep on top of this change in our climate.
Yes.
Which is what this all comes down to. It's change in rainfall patterns and how you hold on to that water when it falls.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, it fits in with, we haven't got to go too many months ago to a time when it was raining a lot, and that's when your water butts filled and collected. And so, if they were double the size or triple the size, then you'd still have much more to keep you going until the next time.
Yeah, I find it painful in winter when there's not really anything I can do with all that water in the water butts.
Yeah.
They just stand full for most of the time.
Yeah.
I'd love to be able to connect them to the toilet, or I'd love to have a grey water use, a grey water system that some other countries have, but we don't yet. And that's all coming. That's all be further down the line. This country will start investing in those things.
Yes.
Because we do have enough water. We just don't hold on to it when it falls.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, super. So if, as you say, not just a May thing, if someone's listening to this at a different time of year, it's still perfectly okay and allowed not to mow your lawns, and perhaps to consider a feature that you can make out of more of a wild garden. You touched on in your article the continuing it through Let It Bloom June, and what's it called? The Joys of Knee-High July.
Knee-High July.
That's
yeah, I think these were coined by Plant Life too. I'm not 100% sure. Certainly Let It Bloom June was. So the idea is, if you've gone through May without mowing and you've quite enjoyed it, you don't have to suddenly mow on the 1st of June.
Absolutely.
You go into Let It Bloom June, see what more happens in your garden, and Knee-High July, I think, kind of explains itself.
Yeah, doesn't it just?
So I think what Plant Life kind of recommend is mowing twice a year. So kind of mowing in April and then mowing again just before autumn. So even in meadows would traditionally have a meadow cut at the in mid-season. So grasses do quite like to be cut, but just once a year ideally, from long to short.
Yeah. I'm sure that some people listening have just thought that's one of the better things that we've ever said publicly on the Water Masters podcast. The fact that they now only have to mow their lawn twice a year is just like brilliant.
Yeah, you've got permission.
Yeah.
And if you're worried about what the neighbours say, you can download a No Mow May leaflet or poster. They have free resources on their website. Stick it in your window. And you'll look really conscientious for not bothering to do anything with your garden.
Quite, exactly. And sit there and enjoy just sitting down in your garden instead. Yeah. Especially making the most of this incredible weather that it looks like we're to continue to have for at least another week or so. Although that's the week between recording this and this episode coming out. So who knows what the weather's doing right now.
But you're right about incredible weather. It actually makes it much more enjoyable weather.
Yeah.
So there is probably always been a bit of a guilt element of having the sprinkler on in the middle of a drought. We're not at drought levels yet, by the way.
Yeah.
We'll save that episode for 1 or 2 months' time.
Yes.
But you can enjoy your garden guilt-free because you're not wasting water on top of it.
Absolutely. Okay. Anything else to add before we wrap up? I think we've covered most points. Of course, as I said at the beginning, if anyone hasn't done it already, please do read Tim's full article on this subject on the watermatters.life website, whilst you're on there, if you haven't already subscribed, to make sure that you get our fortnightly Water Wednesdays email sort of recap and roundup of all of the many articles that we share on the website. Please put your email in there and get involved in the conversation. But I think hopefully a little bit of a different sort of approach this episode, and hopefully some useful ideas and things that people might decide to join in on, whether it's No Mow May or just allocating some space for the benefits of much wildflowers and plants and sort of longer lawns. It would be very interesting to hear if some people have done that. So a good way of getting in touch is through the email newsletter, just to hit reply and let us know what you've been doing in your lawns, and we can get an idea of the collective impact of this, perhaps, as people put their mowers or keep their mowers in the shed or the garage and just go out and enjoy the garden instead. But thank you very much, Tim, for your input and your words of wisdom on the subject of leaving the lawn alone.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Well, enjoy the rest of No Mow May. But sounds like you were there already.
Yeah, absolutely. I could happily do No Mow every single month of the year. Yeah, that's more my laziness than anything else. But no, we've got some beehives at the back of our office here, and so we do enjoy watching the bees sort of make the most of the longer grass and that sort of stuff. And so we are occasionally, I think twice a year, we have a little harvest of our Graph UK honey. That's pretty cool. Although they did find their way into the office 2 weeks ago, was that? Also, I don't actually think it was our bees. I think it was just visiting bees. But we did have to move them on at one point. But no, we've got 2 hives at the back, which are brilliant.
Well, you have to save me a jar.
Oh, absolutely. It's good stuff. It is good stuff. But the more people take part in this No Mow May, the more of it there can be, as the bees will certainly be a beneficiary of that. So thank you very much, Tim. Thank you very much for listening. If you haven't already, please do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. We will be back in 2 weeks' time with more topics on the Water Matters podcast. And until then, enjoy your garden, enjoy the weather, whatever it is doing, and we'll be back to you in 2 weeks' time for the next episode of the Water Matters podcast.